Hello, dear friends, and welcome again to the Learning Future podcast and this season on Education Transformed. Today, it's my absolute delight. It's always my delight. But I tell you, today it's going to be a fascinating conversation with Romana Shaikh. And she is an incredible educator, leader in India, based in Mumbai. And she often asks this question, which is, what does it take to create deep and meaningful change for all? And I have to say, ever since we connected at Salzburg Global Seminar, I've been very taken by, I think, the multidimensional understanding that Romana brings to her work in trying to transform public education in India and look at new school models, but ultimately with her experiences as a coach, as someone that has worked for India for a period of time, as well as the director there leading kind of leadership development. Yeah, it's going to be a wonderful conversation. And so, Romana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Luca. I'm very, very happy to be here. And I'd like to just take a moment to start by greeting you, greeting our listeners. So, Assalamu alaikum, which is peace be with you, and Namaste, which means the divine in me sees the divine in you. And I like to start like that as a way of just honoring my culture and the journey it's been for me really to come back to embracing my culture, and also honoring the people that have come before me, my family, my ancestors, without whom, I think, without the path that they trod before me, I would not be here with you. So thank you for having me. And yeah.
It's a wonderful way to start any conversation. And you know, you would know in Australia, we often do an acknowledgement of country, which is to acknowledge the ongoing human connection. And I'm recording this on the Bidjigal Gadigal country of the Eora Nation in Eastern Sydney today. And your reflection on the ancestry, I think, is so powerful for all of us, you know, and especially when we talk about transformation at any level, especially system or school or organizational transformation. You know, it's this idea of like, where have we come from? And one of my favorite sayings actually is that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. It's such a beautiful reflection, right? On like, oh, wow, that's true. At some point, I was just an idea. I was a hope. I was a dream that, you know, my Greek and Welsh ancestors, in my case, had. It's such a beautiful start. So thank you, Romana. And yeah, I think through that lens, give us your take right now on not just the work you do, but who you are in the world in terms of like the transformation opportunity that we have at all the different levels, from, you know, intrapersonal all the way up to perhaps planetary. I mean, big question, I know, but
Yeah.
what's your reflection? Like, what are you exploring right now? Or what are you learning right now that you think is really pertinent?
Yeah. I think building from the acknowledgement of ancestry, I think I've been present to this idea of just time a lot. And if we were to extend from your quote to what does it mean for us to be good ancestors? And could we look at everything we do in the world today from really that much longer span of time, which is not linear, but still it gives us a bigger window to think of generations to come. And so I think that's been the frame within which I've been exploring a lot of things. And one of the things I think within that I'm sort of trying to find my way back into has just been my embodied sense of my ancestry. And I carry it, right? I carry my ancestry in me. But what does it mean to really tune into that? And how can I, in my practices in the recent few years, around whether it's meditation or yoga or whirling or dance, they've all been practices that have come from so many ancient wisdom traditions, and they're still there. They're available for me to partake in.
Mm.
They're available for me to learn from, and that's sort of been an entry point I've been exploring to reconnect with that which has been lost to many of our cultures, and definitely for mine.
Wow. Fantastic, Romana. Take us into like when we think about transformation as a concept, or maybe when we think about transformation as a state of being, what's your reflection on that? Because a lot of the work that you do now, as far as I can tell, is really focused on not improvement paradigm or not tweaking a system. It very much is like a complete, I wouldn't say invent, I'd say remembering of perhaps, the rich tradition of what it means to be human. And this is something we focus on all the time at the Learning Future, of course, is this human-centered future in a, within a life-centered design frame, life-giving, and how can we move towards abundance and flourishing and thriving? So yeah, what is your perspective, and what are you finding is possible in terms of transforming education? Yeah, what's your perspective as of today?
Thanks for asking that, and I really appreciate how you broadened it from transformation as a lens of being. And I think that's really the key entry point, to stop seeing education as this one institution, but to begin to recognize that what is the role that education needs to play for our world, for our planet today. And from there, if we come to, yes, it's a transformation of the state of being we're in, I think it really begins to make us pause. Because then we have to pause and say, okay, wait, what's the entirety of our life as human beings, and then what's the shift? So I talk a lot about how systemic transformation, which think of as the outside work, is really about this inner work of recognizing how the systems we've grown up in have shaped the choices we make today, have shaped who we are today, and hence have shaped the kind of education that we're driving today.
Yes.
And
That's good. It's great. Keep going. That's fantastic.
I wanted to just link to three shifts that I think of today in this lens. And all of them sort of, I think, come from really ancient wisdom. I don't think it's new information, but it's stuff we've lost. And I think the first one I would say is a shift from this idea of self-improvement to self-discovery.
Nice.
The second would be a shift from separation and individuation to oneness and unity. And the third idea is around a shift from being served by the planet to being in service of the planet.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, all three of those, I think, really resonate with me clearly. And also, I think some of the new narratives that I'm noticing, be it, the UNESCO Future of Education, a New Social Contract report, for example, a seminal generational report that frames these things about, rather than us extracting from the earth, realizing we are nature and therefore must interact in service of thriving. What are kind of some examples you would say in terms of looking at education today of that shift taking place, or of kind of where we find ourselves now in 2023 in this moment post COVID? Do you see us, where do you think we're making progress, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I think we've begun to shift the conversation definitely around asking what is the purpose of education. We're asking about well-being and thriving, and that's sort of begun to really come into the narrative in some places. It may show up as social emotional learning. It may show up as
Yeah.
increased awareness of mental health. So I think there's definitely a shift in narrative. I think in practice is probably where there's few examples when we look at places. So in some of our schools, what we've been noticing is there's a lot more that's happening, which is more hands-on. So whether it's the learning from nature, learning by being in nature, many of our schools, there's schools in Armenia that have made time to just go back to gardening. So children go garden, and it's such a beautiful way of going back to really connecting in a very concrete way with the earth, but also watching life grow. And as a child to realize, oh, I can nurture life. I can see how it grows. Another shift we've been seeing in some of the schools in India has been, and in Sierra Leone, but how we're bringing community back into school, and really trying to shift that relationship, that you don't just come to school to get a report card of your child, but you're part of this. School is a community again. And so there's celebrations that happen with families in schools. There's uh, times when family members come in and they run lessons for kids where they can teach the things that they know, or even just well-being circles together. So families, teachers, children, having that sort of time together where they can reflect on how it's been. And I think some of this started during COVID because you began to see so clearly that children and families needed something different. They needed something different from education. And there was an opportunity there to be able to redefine community itself, to recognize that school is not in that building, and community is not in that region, but it's community is beyond those physical walls. I think these have been shifts that we're beginning to see, not just in our schools, but in the narrative and in many other conversations happening.
Fantastic. There's so many things I want to click onto there. The idea of experiential learning is kind of one. The idea of the parents being part of the learning school. I mean, one thing that we often reflect here is the shift from the institution, which you've spoken to, towards the ecosystem lens, and the idea that actually we're all elements of this constantly evolving dynamic human system. And you can almost go beyond the human now, right? And you see some really wonderful articulations of this, which is, it's not so much human-centered design, what we need. We need life-centered design, right? Because that expands the frame once more. There's no point focusing on the user, if the user is living in an environment that's not conducive to their overall thriving. And that means optimal learning and mastery, as much as it means also social and emotional health. So what are you seeing in your work at Kizazi and you can give us a bit of more of a sense of, like, that's one of the roles that you play in the world, in terms of which kind of models, or which, I don't like the word interventions necessarily. I feel like that's a bit industrialized, right? It's really, what kind of approaches or what possibilities are sticking in terms of shifting the way that learning and teaching is taking place, but also in how kind of becoming is being woven into, this. And I think this is where we began with identity, stepping in as who we are. One of our favorite sayings is, it's not what you know or what you do with what you know, it's who you are as you do things with what you know. It's a deeper level of character. We need a character world in a creation economy. What's your reflection with that in terms of what you're seeing that's sticking?
So at Kizazi, we work as a global intermediary. So in each region we look for a local leadership. We look for a local NGO that works in schools, in the public schools. And the idea behind that was to say that the models of schooling we need today really deeply need to be contextualized. And so we can't create them. There isn't a one size fits all. So let's really inquire with local leadership into what's that,
Mm.
what is needed here, what is needed there, and acknowledge that it's different. And so in doing this work now in India, in Sierra Leone, in Armenia, and we've also worked with a group of school leaders and entrepreneurs across different countries in Africa. I would say there's three pieces, and this is something we're just about beginning to write, and we're seeing similar. One is this idea of connection and really meaningful relationships. So, what is that relationship between a teacher and a child? And it's been in a certain paradigm. It's been in the paradigm of teacher knows, teacher tells, teacher teaches,
Yes.
and student receives. But what if we began to see students as children, not just as students, but as children? Then could we also see teacher as human, not just,
Mm.
and then can we also see parent, not just a parent, but as human? So in this broader theme of whole child, we talk a lot about contextual, whole child, and then whole school. And within this theme of whole child, it's this idea of really connecting to each other as humans.
Yeah.
And so that takes up place and time in the school very differently. We've seen schools prioritize time to just sit and talk with each other, to sit and really be curious about, okay, how was your day and what are you learning, and who are you? Not
Mm.
just how are you going to get better,
Mm.
just who are you? What are you learning about you? And I'm curious, I'm really interested in knowing that. So that kind of connection where we can truly just see each other,
Mm.
wholeness, that's an idea that I think families, children, teachers have all found so simple,
Yeah.
so intuitive, and yet it's just been like, oh, I never knew my children like this before,
Wow.
or I don't have to control the class anymore. I can just trust that my students, my children, will create learning.
Mm.
So I think it's been a very liberating sort of expansive experience to allow teachers, children, and families to just be their whole selves in school the way they show up. I think that's one of my most favorite shifts that we've seen stick and come into very
Mm.
tangible practice, very tangible changes. And okay, we're going to spend 30 minutes in a school day, 15 minutes at the beginning, 15 minutes at the end, in investing in
Yes.
just each other.
Romana, that's beautiful. How would you respond to someone that says we don't have time? What would you say to a person like that, who's well-intentioned, of course, and saying, "Oh, we have to teach so much content, and we care about the kids." What would you say to a person like that that's thinking in that way? I would say.
I think I would genuinely honor and understand that, because the way school has been designed for years, right, decades, we have not given the time. So the very structure of the school, and that's how it becomes systemic,
Mm.
has taught us this message that what's more important between relationships and results is academic results.
Mm.
And so it's not enough for me to just tell a teacher or a school principal, hey, you've got to do this. We have to recognize that something has to change about the design of the school and what we value. So if we keep measuring just something,
Mm.
every time we go to school, we only ask for something, and all of that becomes learning. It's not shifting the message. The second I would say is it's not enough to expect the adults to suddenly live and lead in a way that they haven't experienced themselves.
Definitely.
So our entry point with all of our schools is to create this space for connection with the adults first.
Yeah.
Does every teacher and every head teacher have a space where they are just sitting and saying, okay, how am I feeling today? And what's going on with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my experience has been that when we've done that with teachers, you just feel it. You recognize, oh, this is such a big difference. It's making a difference to my life.
Yeah.
And it's that experience of feeling valued, of feeling seen, that once a teacher or any adult in the system experiences, that's what will flow.
Yeah.
They will just do it. Then it doesn't even have to be a separate 15 minutes. You could integrate it into your history lesson.
Mm.
Point is not the time, right? The point is the attitude and that experience of just caring for each other. So I would say, yeah. And how has that been for you? How does it feel for you as a teacher that you don't really have time to get to know your kids?
Mm.
I need to make time to really listen to what is that teacher trying to tell me. They're
Mm.
not pushing back on
Mm.
they're sharing a genuine challenge that, yeah, I want to, but I can't. So
Yeah.
that's my opportunity then to lean in and say,
Mm.
okay, let me connect with you here.
Mm. That's so wonderful, Romana. If we take that one level up from, or maybe I like to think one level down from a systems view, to kind of elevate the educators themselves and the students, children as whole people, even above that. But what is the system responsibility to help educators do that work more easily? And I think, as you're talking about, there needs to be a direct experience. For example, it's pretty difficult to cultivate agency with learners if the educators themselves don't have a sense of agency. And I think we get this wrong. The same with focus on student well-being misses the point. It's well-being for all within this learning ecosystem, right? Because teachers that aren't well looked after are not well supported to be able to, their state of being, even if they're doing the practice, the state of being is such that it's compromised as they do their important work. So what would you say is a system responsibility, or like a feature of a system that can support that more powerfully?
And here now by system, we mean like people in power. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, when I think of the system elements, I start to think of teacher training, or of numbers of minutes that must be taught, or of curriculum expectations and standards and testing and all the things, that kind of features that really try to create coherence in a good way, and in a bad way, control and command, I think, which is the transition we might be seeing in terms of the system change required, right? But yeah, well, what do you think is most needed from a system level view?
Yeah. I think what we've missed out on from a systems level is the system is so far from the lived experience of a child today,
Mm.
uh, that they're operating, as you said, in trying to create coherence. But in some ways, it's so vague and abstract. Who is this child? Who is this teacher? So I wonder about what are ways to again make it personal again, make this system that has become impersonal something out there, something about the structures. What does it mean for us to cultivate relationships and whoever that is in the line, right? So for us,
Mm.
the way our local NGO partner interacts with government, what is the conversation they're having with their government? And is it only about the numbers? Or is it also creating space for a child to come in, for a student, for a teacher to come in? And so making it personal, so there's
Yeah.
relationship then. And the purpose of that, again, would be to re-anchor in context. So we're asking and trying to open up this conversation about, in your system, what do your children need? What do your teachers need? And
Mm.
acknowledging that from this wholeness lens.
Yeah.
Um, I think the tension over there that I've been experiencing, which is probably the next one for us to explore, is this notion of time.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of government systems operate again under a lot of pressure of having things done in like a 1-year plan and a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. So I wonder what it would mean for us to begin to again stretch that idea. There might be some things you want to do in 1 year, but if we're trying to fundamentally transform a system, can we also hold that longer term lens? So I'm not asking you to throw everything out today.
Yeah.
How do we work towards what you said, right? More agency for the teacher, going away from a scripted curriculum to just having, to investing in the teachers to understand like, okay, what would be a 10-year journey for a child? Not the curriculum for 10 years, but this child over 10 years. And that's not going to change in 1 year, perhaps. But the orientation, I think, when we ground on context, when we shift the evidence we collect, so from collecting just academic data, can we start collecting evidence on how are students just emotionally regulated in class?
Yeah.
What are the kind of trauma histories children are bringing in?
Yes.
How is that showing up? When we start broadening, right, what we look for,
Great. Welcome back, Romana. It was you were just speaking about really metrics and measures. And I think, you know, this idea of moving beyond data into evidencing,
yes,
which is something that, yeah, I think we are seeing happen because what gets measured gets managed and we value what we measure. And so that's, yeah, that reflection is a really powerful one. And I like your language even about, you know, we have data over here and people are obsessed by data, but really it's evidencing, which gives us more space to kind of really understand the human experience. Yes. Is that right? Is that your impression?
Yeah, and I think, again, it can go down the same route that we are in. So I'm not saying that we simply change the metric and now start chasing new metrics.
Cool.
Because we're shifting the paradigm of education. So how can we use evidencing to explain and to understand and expand our view of what children need? It's not to say, okay, here's 5 new goals now. It's not to say now you have to improve in language and maths and self-regulation and social emotional skills. That's not it. It's saying, can we expand the way we look at and understand the entire human being and what's needed? So it's a way of understanding context. So I think it's important to do that and to keep the relational, personal perspective, because again, otherwise data becomes impersonal. It becomes just something you see on a spreadsheet. So I think that's really a challenge of this time, to use evidence, but use it, like you keep repeating, in a human-centered way, in a way it serves life to move forward, not just replaces the dashboard.
Yeah, yeah. I want you to explore this a bit further for us, because I often think about the kind of efficiency paradigm that's baked into education. And again, and I refer to these as legacy mental models or legacy systems, right? That sometimes are palliative, right? And they're on life support. And we should, in some ways, transition them to the next stage, you know, like a death and a rebirth, quite literally, you know, and whatever. And so, but yeah, I do wonder about even the focus on scaling, you know, like we want to scale this approach. And I mean, I agree. We do want to scale innovative practices and pedagogies, ways of teaching that make the biggest impact. Like, yes, we want to do that. But I feel like there's something around the essence we sometimes lose when we have a scale paradigm, as opposed to what I might call a spreading paradigm, right? Which is you plant the seeds in all these places. And of course, the environment will cause that practice to be unique because of this question you keep on coming back to, which is wonderful. It's like, what is truly needed? It's such a great question. And when you start with the question, not the answer. I think then, the right answers can be found because we're kind of starting with the question. What's your view on that? The efficiency paradigm, scaling versus spreading.
I agree with you. I think if we came back to the stepping into seeing our position here from are we good ancestors, it would shift how we think about results and time frame for one. So I think efficiency comes from that need to see results in my lifetime. And the idea that I can scale something everywhere comes from the idea that, hey, one size fits all. Both of those are kind of colonial ideas.
Yeah.
Within my own country of India, there is so much diversity. I can't, a child in where I live in an urban city of Mumbai, their life and my life, just by function of a few social indicators, where I live, where they live, what religion I come from, what religion another person comes from, it fundamentally changes who I am and hence what I need. So I think when we think about scaling, it's important to ask the question, what are we scaling and in service of who? And will it really meet the needs? So instead of scaling, when we think of spreading, as you said, there's a connotation in spreading that I'm reading into, which is again about agency and choice.
Yeah.
That I've spread the seeds, and if it works, it will get picked up. The other way we could think about it is recognizing that there are systems, the invisible systems,
Yes.
that are making us continue to act in certain ways.
Yes.
So I have an internalized system of do, which is a very particular, if I may say so, masculine way of life.
You may say so.
I have a lot of internalized patriarchy, which will make me act in certain ways, and I will constantly be in this rush of needing to prove myself, needing to be loud, have the answer. And so when I keep coming back to recognizing it as a system that needs to change, it's again asking that question of, are my ways of operating in the world, are they just a new packaged version of something that I'm trying to break to begin with? So if I've changed from English education to now saying English and maths, I'm still perpetuating a certain system. I'm expecting children to learn in a second language, in a third language, and just made that a bar. But I'm perpetuating a system. Just because I'm doing it better and getting results doesn't mean it's what that child needs.
Yes. So interesting. Oh my gosh. I want us to go in a slight direction. You just opened something, Romana, for me. I know we're not got that much time left, but this idea, I've heard this saying before. It's not my own, but it's the idea that an obsession with scale is male and pale. It's a really interesting way of thinking about, the kind of idea of like crushing it and like, yeah, I'm a machine, I'm an animal, like that kind of element, I think I believe it is patriarchal, but I don't believe it to be kind of what I try to extricate from that is kind of, and this is what I'd like you to reflect on, because I think you might have an answer to this, is like the role of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, if we use that language, right? So we're going a slightly different direction here, but because the idea, I think, is structure, progress, good. Obsession with more is kind of a pathology that has taken us to the brink of ecological collapse, right? It's baked into our economic late stage capitalist systems, which we're going to have to evolve lest we not have an environment that can sustain our life, really. What's your reflection on that? Big question, I know.
Big question. We could do a whole other episode.
I know we could. I was like, I think I'm going to go in this direction and see what happens. But Yeah, because it's not something that we would talk about in a class, like in a school system thing. We don't talk about polarities very much, right? But it's something I'm very curious about when you look at even societal design or the future of work, or even third wave feminism, or the men's rights movements now, or healthy masculinity, which are all spaces I'm trying to understand more and contribute to. But yeah, I'd love your vantage point from Mumbai as someone that has worked quite a lot in, I would say, in kind of liberation movements.
Hmm. So in our so growing up, even at home, I often talk about my mom and dad as my mom was the religious, God-fearing woman. She prayed 5 times a day. She kept all her fasts, no matter what. Right?
Mm.
She really, really was religious to the book, is religious to the book. My dad, on the other hand, was very much of the God is my co-pilot. Like he's my friend. So he was God is everywhere, and I don't need to do certain things to be in touch with that.
Mm.
Uh, and so even growing up, there was always that sort of difference between religion and spirituality. And in many of our homes in India, this idea of the divine masculine, the divine feminine, or consciousness or spirituality is very much part of conversation in many homes, and it may not be also, but it's in the culture. So I think it's a great point you made there, that it's not in schools, and that itself is worth questioning. I'm thinking, where did that go? If it's such a big part of culture, whatever religion you're from, there is something about divinity and consciousness in many cultures, which has separated from this modern institution of education, which in India is not mine. And we inherited it.
Yes.
And when it came and when it was created for very specific purposes. Amongst those was a looking down upon almost on things that were not, quote unquote, written, scientific. I can see my finger thingies.
Yes, yeah. Quotation marks, yeah. Yeah, quotes.
And so I think there's a lot that we lost in that, and part of that is, as you said, instead of thinking about the divine masculinity, it became about the man and patriarchy. And that's not what either you or me are talking about. What you and I are saying is all of us as human beings, all of Earth as creation, has a masculine energy to it and has a feminine energy to it. And one of my teachers, my spiritual teachers, was saying that what you just said as well, the place we are in the world has toppled this balance. There's too much of the masculinity, which has led to what you've said, right? This go, and order. So if we peel it back, masculinity is about order. It's about producing things. It's about movement forward. It's about development in many ways. The femininity is what allows us to say, hey, let's go along together. Let's nurture. Let's stop. Let's pause. And so it's important for this sort of the pausing, the gathering, the nurturing, which is feminine. That's why the feminine, the female form, is the birth giver. But it's not possible to give birth without the masculine energy in it, right? So even biologically, it had to be balanced. And spiritually as well, it's this balance of energies, of pausing, gathering, taking people along.
Yes.
And then embracing our masculinity to move forward. Gather and we move. We gather, move. But it's a dance.
Yeah.
And so I think we are in a time where it's lovely to hear that there are all of these projects around masculinity and around how the masculine can embrace their feminine, because I think patriarchy has done a disservice to a lot of boys and men and people who identify as men as well.
Yeah.
And it is creating space for this feminine energy, which will make us pause, which will be uncomfortable for us, because even women today have internalized a lot of masculine ways of being. So it's work that we all need to do in honor of saying we all need to recognize that our planet, Mother Earth, requires us to stop,
Yeah.
requires us to just listen a little more. And
Wow.
I don't know if this answered your question,
No,
but
it's
it was so big. I went big as well.
Romana, it's wonderful. And I just feel like we could and should do another conversation about that specific. I'm glad I asked the question, and thank you for your answer. I mean, I feel like we have stripped the kind of metaphysical so much from our modern world that it's problematic, that people become purposeless or meaningless if it's just about, the grind and the hustle, as opposed to spiritual questions for which you can be an agnostic, by the way, or even, like, you don't have to have a religious, you can say, what's my life for? What am I acting in service of? Those are, to me, those are spiritual questions, because as the saying goes, and I can't remember who said it, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
And not human beings having a spiritual experience. So there's a really interesting piece of that, like the self-transcendence, that even people like, Abraham Maslow were talking about later in his career as a humanistic psychologist. How do you transcend the individual to remember the collective? It's like, that we're in this all together, the really deep First Nations wisdom or system level thinking that I think is being restored, and an integration, I think, Romana, both at an individual level with that polarity within all of us, but also at the societal level. So great answer. Oh, and so much more I would love to learn from and with you on that. So let's tab that for next time. I have a final question for you, which is, if we were to fast forward in, let's say, I like this question, a child's born today while we're having this conversation, and in 18 years' time, they are finishing what used to be called formal education. Maybe it's no longer called that in 18 years' time. But, I wonder about what kind of experience you would dream that they would have. What kind of future of education are you effectively fighting for or hoping can be co-created, especially to use your framing if we are to act as good ancestors? What does that look like for you? A future of transformed education?
I'm going to pause and check in on that. I would say that a child being really full of joy and levity, and a child, an adult, actually, you said 18, they would be able to, they would be so sure of knowing what they know and not knowing what they don't know. I think that's a big difference from education today, for a child at 18 to say, hey, today, this is how I feel. This is how I'm contributing. So today I'm going to be doing this, and this is what I'm learning. I'm in this pursuit of figuring out how I can be of service in the world, and this strength I have of being able to visualize a future, and I can create art out of that and communicate stories. So that's what I'm doing today. And it's okay. I would imagine that we don't ask that child, what are you going to do in 10 years? Because when he gets there, he'll know it. So I guess a education transformed would be one that really honors the present, that honors every child as being whole and on this ongoing journey of self-discovery.
Mm.
And in that is youth that really feel connected to that unity. So being connected within, being able to say, here's how I'm feeling right now.
Mm.
And how are you? I can feel your pain, and I'm curious. Can I be there for you?
Mm.
I think those three would be how they would show up. I think in a light and joyful and really tuned in young person.
Beautiful. Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Romana. It's a beautiful, to speak that into existence, it's a lovely way to end our conversation today, one that's really focused on system, presence, self-discovery, spirituality. I think, some of those really powerful things that make us most human. And I certainly feel like quite zen having spoken to you as well. Ramona, I think your energy is such, even the 10-second pause, I was like, wow, we are moving very fast and very quickly. And so how do we ground and then still contribute optimally? But a beautiful reflection on Education Transformed from Mumbai. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, Luca. And just want to say thanks to all of the teachers I've had that have made it possible for me to speak what I've learned from them. And thank you for giving me this space.
Beautiful.